Extinction is supposed to be a one-way street. When a species dies out, it stays dead, locked in the earth as a permanent, unchanging record. The ultimate example of this biological permanence is the Great Die-Off that wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. By the 19th century, scientists were obsessed with cataloging these dead relics. Louis Agassiz, a prominent Swiss-born naturalist, spent years conducting exhaustive taxonomy research, attempting to neatly classify all prehistoric life found in the fossil record. This fossilized fish is exactly the kind of specimen Agassiz studied. In 1839, he classified it as a coelacanth, naming it for the distinct hollow spines found in its tail. But what really stood out were its primitive, fleshy, lobed fins, which looked remarkably different from modern fish. Agassiz placed this creature firmly in the deep past. Looking at the geological strata where these fossils were found, scientists concluded the coelacanth went entirely extinct during the same massive event that took out the dinosaurs. For over a century, the scientific community completely agreed on this point. The coelacanth existed only as an inert rock, a definitively closed chapter in the history of life on Earth. This is the 1859 title page of Charles Darwin's controversial work on the origin of species. The publication of this book sparked an intense search for physical evidence to back up the theory of evolution by natural selection. Darwin's theory faced a major biological problem. If animals evolved from one another, creatures that live on land must share a common set of ancestors that once lived in the ocean. At some point, an interim creature had to develop both the ability and the need to drag itself out of the water. Biologists retroactively seized upon Agassiz's extinct coelacanth to fill this gap. Because those lobed fins were internally supported by bone, they were interpreted as early limbs. Textbooks across the early 20th century displayed the coelacanth as the missing link between sea and land. There is a deep irony here. The scientific community built sweeping narratives about the origins of terrestrial life based entirely on incomplete skeletons pressed between layers of stone. They were projecting behavior onto a fish they had never actually seen swim. Relying strictly on the fossil record has an inherent flaw. It assumes that the absence of fossil evidence equates to the absence of life. If a species stops leaving bones in the mud, we assume it died out. But what if the missing link was still swimming? The answer arrived in December 1938 on the coast of South Africa. Captain Hendrik Goosen was trawling the waters when his nets pulled up a massive, bizarre, 5-foot-long pale blue fish. A local museum naturalist named Marjorie Courtney Latimer rushed down to the docks to inspect the catch. Picking away layers of slime, she instantly recognized the creature's hard scales and strange, ancient-looking lobed fins. She knew she had something incredible, but she was fighting a ticking clock. The 127-pound fish was rapidly putrefying in the intense summer heat. She frantically tried to preserve it, but both the local mortuary and a food cold storage facility flatly refused to take a rotting fish. Desperate, she fought with a cab driver to shove the stinking creature into the trunk of his taxi and rushed it to a local amateur taxidermist. Despite their best efforts, the soft tissue was lost to decay. They managed to save only the skin and the backbone. Biological history often hinges not on sterile laboratories, but on the frantic, messy actions of individuals. Latimer's stubborn taxi ride single-handedly rescued a 50-million-year-old biological secret from the garbage bin. Hoping to classify the specimen, Latimer mailed a rough sketch of the remains to J.L.B. Smith, a self-trained ichthyologist. Initially, Smith doubted his own intuition, thinking it was preposterous that this creature could still be alive after millions of years. Months later, Smith finally arrived in East London to view the remains in person. He described the moment of confirmation as a physical shock, a white-hot blast that left him shaky. Scale by scale, bone by bone, and fin by fin, he confirmed it was a true, living coelacanth. When the taxidermied fish went on display, it triggered a global media frenzy. Cables poured in from around the world. Newspapers proudly declared that South Africa had outdone the Loch Ness Monster by producing physical proof of a prehistoric beast. Because the soft tissue had rotted away, much of the animal's biology remained a mystery. Scientists offered a reward for another specimen, but delayed by the Second World War, they had to wait 14 agonizing years until a fully intact coelacanth was finally caught off the Comoro Islands in 1952. The physical rediscovery of this fish forced the scientific establishment to accept a jarring reality. Modern humans share the Earth with creatures from deep time that had managed to bridge a 60-million-year gap in the fossil record. As decades passed and more specimens were recovered, the coelacanth was subjected to modern scientific scrutiny. In 2013, researchers successfully sequenced the creature's entire DNA genome. The genetics revealed the coelacanth is not the direct ancestor Darwinists expected. Data proves lungfish diverged much closer to four-legged animals. Instead, the coelacanth occupies a side branch of vertebrate evolution, a biological cousin existing on a distinct path. Biologists now classify it as a Lazarus taxon, a species that disappears completely from the fossil record, only to turn up alive later. Genetic studies show it has added some 62 new genes over the millions of years since its supposed extinction. The coelacanth functioned as a highly adapted survivor, finding an evolutionary loophole to persist in the deep ocean while its shallow water relatives disappeared. This split screen shows how they pulled off this disappearing act. Ancient coelacanths lived in shallow swamps, an environment where dead animals fossilized easily in the mud. But the survivors adapted to the deep ocean, where natural fossilization is incredibly rare. They didn't stop existing, they just stopped leaving evidence behind. There is a tragic irony to all of this. After surviving for 65 million years perfectly hidden from the surface world, the moment humans found the coelacanth, our obsession immediately threatened its existence. A destructive black market emerged. Aquariums sought live specimens, and practitioners of pseudomedicine theorized that spinal fluid from a dinosaur fish could grant immortality. This drove the price of a catch up to $2,000 an ounce, nearly hunting the species to extinction. Eventually, the very woman who saved that first specimen, Marjorie Courtney Latimer, concluded that perhaps it was time humanity left the coelacanth in peace. The coelacanth proves that the fossil record is merely a fragmented snapshot of life, not the whole movie. Nature is vastly more resilient, complex, and mysterious than our textbooks suggest.